Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking into a case that's probably been on your radar, the disappearance of 11-year-old Madalina Cojocari.
From Cornelius, North Carolina, back in November 2022.
Exactly. And, you're likely looking for the key facts, the sort of evolving story, without getting bogged down. That's what we're aiming for. We've been digging into reports from WCNC Charlotte, WBTV primarily.
Trying to pull out the really critical stuff.
Yeah, the mission here is to get the core insights into, what happened around Madalina's disappearance and where the investigation stands now.
In this case, it really presents a complex picture right from the get-go.
It does.
What immediately stands out, I think, is the timeline. When she was last seen versus when she was actually reported missing.
Okay, let's talk about that. Last seen getting off her school bus, November 21st, 2022.
Right, an 11-year-old girl.
But her parents, they didn't report her missing until December 13th.
Which is, what, roughly 3 weeks later?
Yeah, about 3 weeks. That's a really long time in these situations, isn't it?
Significant. And it wasn't even the parents who first raised the alarm, was it?
No, that's another detail. It was actually a school counselor. Started asking questions because Madalina missed a meeting.
Right.
That alone, it just makes you wonder, doesn't it? What was happening in those 3 weeks? Why didn't the parents call the school or the police sooner?
Precisely. What could possibly explain that kind of delay?
It suggests, it raises questions about their level of concern or maybe awareness early on.
And that delay, obviously, it must have impacted the investigation right from the start.
Absolutely. The first hours and days are so critical. Getting leads quickly, finding potential evidence before it disappears or gets compromised. 3 weeks is a massive head start for whatever happened.
And speaking of compromised evidence, the search warrants we looked at, they mentioned something pretty disturbing.
The fire pit.
Yeah. The burning of Madalina's belongings. Her mattress, clothes, even her Halloween costume, family photos, all apparently burned after she disappeared. And it wasn't just things that burn easily. Her stepfather, Christopher Palmater, he testified he saw things like stainless steel mugs, closet racks in there too, things that wouldn't just vanish in a fire.
Right. And then he said the ashes were completely cleared out afterwards. So you have these unburnable items mentioned, and then the total clearing of the ashes. What does that suggest to you? The level of detail there.
Well, the deliberate burning, especially of things that wouldn't fully burn, like metal, and then cleaning it all out, it suggests a very high degree of intention.
Like not just casually getting rid of stuff.
Exactly. It points more towards maybe a calculated effort to eliminate any trace. It could potentially indicate, a consciousness of guilt, or at least wanting to hide exactly what was burned.
The warrants also pointed the investigation in a specific direction early on.
Yeah, the believed sexual exploitation angle.
Right. They mentioned focusing on potential sexual exploitation of a minor child victim. And this led them to look at her digital footprint.
They found a Discord account.
Yeah, one they believed belonged to Madalina. It had unread messages.
And Discord, for people who might not know, it's a platform for private communities, direct messaging.
Which is great for lots of things, but unfortunately its private nature can also be, exploited.
Right, by predators.
Yeah.
It's known for that, sadly, due to it being sometimes less regulated than maybe other big social platforms.
So that early focus it's a really chilling part of this whole story.
It is. Very significant. It shows investigators were considering multiple possibilities right away. Not just who might be involved physically, but also if she'd been vulnerable online beforehand.
Okay, going back to the timeline and the parents' actions. Madalina's mother, Diana Cojocari, her actions after the disappearance also raise, a lot of questions.
The money transfers.
Exactly. These payments to a priest in Moldova, her home country.
Totaling about $4,000, right? In the weeks after Madalina vanished.
Yeah, and apparently payments were made both before and after a specific phone call. Detectives confirmed these Western Union transfers going to her mother and this priest.
Why Moldova? And why a priest? You have to wonder about the nature of those payments, that phone call.
It could be desperation, seeking help outside normal channels, or something else, moving money, trying to influence things remotely.
Those are definitely the critical questions investigators would have. The timing, the location, the recipient. It all warrants really close scrutiny, especially with Moldova being her home country. Adds another layer.
And the picture just gets murkier. There was a text message from Diana on December 2nd, so after Madalina was supposedly last seen.
What did it say?
It apparently suggested she was in the presence of the missing child.
Okay, that contradicts the timeline.
Right. Then, just 2 days after that text, December 4th, she drives towards the North Carolina mountains.
Saying she was looking for Madalina?
That was her claim. But during that trip, she got an oil change in Hickory, and the person working there didn't see Madalina in the car.
Alone on a search trip shortly after texting she was with her daughter.
And then on top of that, court records show Diana actually suggested her husband, Christopher Palmer, gave the girl away for money.
Wow. So blaming him.
It's a real tangle of conflicting stories and actions.
It really is. Her statements, her movements, they present this very complex, often contradictory picture. The text, the solo trip, the accusation against her husband. Major inconsistencies.
You can see why investigators would be looking closely at her.
Yeah, and it likely played a big part in why she was eventually considered a suspect in her daughter's disappearance.
And now, there's another significant hurdle. Diana Cojocari went back to Moldova.
After she was released from jail here, right?
Yeah.
May 2024.
Correct. And the complication is, as you probably know, the U.S. doesn't have an extradition treaty with Moldova.
Which
means getting someone back to face charges, if any more were filed related to Madalina's disappearance, becomes incredibly difficult.
Right. An extradition treaty basically sets the rules for countries to return alleged criminals to each other. Without one, it's challenging, to say the least.
So, while she hasn't been charged directly with the disappearance at this point, her leaving the country definitely makes things harder for investigators down the line.
It really does. It highlights how complex international investigations can be, the limits of legal reach across borders.
Now, legally, both parents did face consequences for that delayed reporting.
Yes, failure to report the disappearance of a child.
Diana Cojocari pleaded guilty to that, served some jail time. And interestingly, while she was in jail, she picked up another charge.
What was that?
Felony possession of a controlled substance. Cocaine and fentanyl-based, apparently.
Okay. And Palmer, this stepfather.
He pleaded not guilty to the failure to report charge, but he was found guilty.
And his sentence.
He got 30 months of supervised probation. His defense was basically pointing the finger at Diana.
Saying she knew where Madalina was and was hiding her.
Essentially, yes. That was his argument. It just paints this picture of a deeply fractured family dynamic.
It certainly does. And the legal outcomes show how seriously the failure to report is taken. His defense strategy just adds another layer of conflict to the whole narrative.
And just to sort of close that chapter on their relationship, they finalized their divorce pretty recently, March of 2025.
Which, given everything, isn't perhaps surprising, speaks to the immense personal toll.
So, with all this going on with the parents, what about Madalina herself? Any sightings? Leads?
There were a couple of notable reports. Early on, December 2022, surveillance photos from Sugar Mountain.
Okay.
They showed a child and a man described as physically consistent with Madalina and her only known U.S. blood relative, Octavian Sabanu.
Her uncle?
I believe so, yes. That must have seemed like a strong lead at the time.
Definitely, but what came of it?
It's unclear if it led anywhere definitive. Then, much later, July 2023, there was a reported sighting at a gas station way out in California.
California, that's a long way.
Yeah. It was investigated, but the post about it on social media was later deleted. Seems like that one fizzled out.
So, possible leads, but nothing concrete panning out. Must be incredibly frustrating for investigators sorting through all that.
Oh, absolutely. Sightings, especially unconfirmed ones, they're tough. The Sugar Mountain photos were tangible, something to pursue. The California one shows people are watching, which is good, but also the risk of misinformation.
And they've had hundreds of leads, apparently.
Which just underscores how much work is going into this, how persistent the investigation is.
And it is still very much active. Cornelius police, the FBI, the SBI, they're all still working on it.
Still trying to find answers.
Yeah, and there's still a reward out, up to $25,000 for information leading to an arrest and conviction.
And they released that age progression photo recently.
Right, on what would have been her 14th birthday this past April. A really stark reminder of how long she's been missing.
And there was a vigil on her 13th birthday, too. The community hasn't forgotten.
No, definitely not. It's clear law enforcement and the community, they remain committed to finding her.
That sustained effort, the reward, the photo. It all shows this is still a high priority. Public awareness is key.
So when we try to wrap our heads around all this, we're just left with so many unanswered questions, aren't we?
Definitely.
Why that huge delay in reporting her missing? What really happened with those burned items? What's the true story behind the money sent to Moldova?
And the conflicting accounts from the parents.
Yeah.
The different stories, the accusations.
Exactly. Despite everything that's come out, the core answers about what actually happened to Madalina, where she is, they're still missing.
The complexities here are just immense. That initial delay is such a critical, lost window of time.
Yeah.
The burned items, the Moldova connection, they add these layers of suspicion that haven't been peeled back yet. And the parents' inconsistencies just muddy the waters even more. Those unanswered questions are really the heart of the mystery.
It's just a truly heartbreaking situation, and it really highlights how difficult these missing children investigations can be. So, considering all these different threads, the reporting delay, the fire pit, Moldova, the conflicting narratives, what do you think? What are the most critical puzzle pieces still out there that might lead to a breakthrough? And what does this case really underscore about the challenges these investigations face?
Well, I think the most critical thing is still figuring out what exactly happened during those first 3 weeks, between her being last seen and being reported missing.
Unpacking that time period.
Yes. Understanding the family dynamics, the events, that seems paramount, and also getting more clarity on those Moldova payments, their actual purpose, that could be huge.
Right.
As for what it underscores, sadly, it shows how time itself becomes a massive obstacle, how lack of cooperation or potential evidence tampering can really complicate things. But it also, it emphasizes the importance of public vigilance and just the relentless dedication of law enforcement trying to find answers, even when it's incredibly challenging and uncertain.